humanity, regardless of where it is or how it is or who it is. When you are a cop, a prison guard, a correctional officer, a jailer, a chief jailer, a sheriff, a chief of police, an investigator, a social worker, a CPS worker, um, working in nonprofit, non-governmental agencies to help reintegrate offenders into society, we walk in muddy water. We see the worst of society. Okay? And you have to be socialized into a point of view and into a way where you can understand. A little bit of desensitization has to go on. Understanding that this socialization is fundamental to the management of criminal justice is important to ensure that your agents remain mentally healthy and physically healthy. Have you seen the cops walking around here? You know, there's all these jokes about, you know, cops and eating donuts and eating things that, you know, basically it's not healthy. You know, they spend forever and a day in a car on the cell block. They spend forever in the pods, you know, doing whatever they do. They don't have time to take care of themselves. I remember working CPS and probation. It was rare that I stopped for lunch. I would get a soda and a candy bar or something, or a bag of chips, something that tied me over until I got home. By the time I got home, I was too hungry, too tired to eat, even though I was hungry. So what would I do? I'd make a sandwich, or I would grab a bag of popcorn, or I'd have pizza or a hamburger, something that's not good for me. And I just packed on the weight. I was at 285 pounds when I started working here at UTPB. Now that I'm at UTPB, I've got the time to exercise. I've got the time to work, and we forget about ourselves when we're working in these types of jobs. So it's important that you ensure that you take care of yourself before everything else. Okay. We have to deal with cynicism and stress and official deviance and corruption that we see. We have to deal with all of these things. We have to deal with immorality, and the things that people do to their children is horrible. The things that people do to other people is even worse. And we, as criminal justice practitioners, are responsible for making sure that we are socialized and pretty much desensitized to this part of our society. You know, this is where the role of ethics is going to come in. And it's important to consider, in the realm of the socialization process, what kind of mechanism are you going to dictate in the organization, and what kind of mechanisms can you impose within your agency to dictate ethics. And for those of you that have taken my ethics class, I teach that ethics is a mindset. Ethics is the way that you live your life. You can't impose ethics on anybody. What you can do is impose a standard of conduct. We call it the ethics, or we call it a standard of ethics, but it's not. What it is a standard of behavior. It is a standard of how we do things. One of the things that really always confused me was when I worked for the Concho Valley Community Supervision Corrections Department. I was sworn in to protect and defend the Constitution, to protect and defend the community, to help rehabilitate, and they gave me a badge. But I wasn't allowed to wear that badge. I had to keep the badge in my pocket. The only time I was allowed to show my badge was when I was trying to get into a club to do bar checks. You know, the rest of the time in my life, you know, that badge stayed in my pocket. It was absolutely pointless to have it. When I went and worked for the PECUS community supervision down in Alpine and Brewster County, Um, yeah, it was called the Pecos County Community Supervision and Corrections, but there were 15 counties that all fell underneath the Pecos County. The headquarters was in Fort Stockton, and nowhere near to Pecos. Pecos has its own group of people, but Big Lake and Crane and Brewster County and Fort Davis and Marfa and this humongous Culberson County, um, McCamey was all in the jurisdiction of the Pecos County CSCD. And headquartered out of Fort Stockton up and down Interstate 10. We wore a badge everywhere we went. Okay. If we were off duty, the badge had to be on our belt. Okay. We wore the badge everywhere we went. And then when I worked for CPS, we had a little ID card, but that ID card went into a folder. I might even have it here. It went into a little ID card carrier, and there was a badge on the other side of it. I wore it all the time, and I wear this badge around my neck, and I had to wear it to get in and out of the building. I wore it as a way to identify myself when I was doing investigations and I was doing work with my clients. If I didn't have my badge, I couldn't go to work. So these are codes of behavior, not really codes of ethics. But we're going to talk about those a little bit more here in a second. So researchers have suggested the need to form a civil management under which staff members are somewhat free to discuss corruption because of the thin blue line. And now we're talking about the socialization again. And the thin blue line is extremely disturbing in that the thin blue line sets up and establishes a way to protect corruption. Okay. And we're gonna, I'll get back to that here in a minute. So let's get into the lecture. I know I'm already 12 minutes in, and that was just an introduction. The occupational socialization is a process by which a person acquires the values, attitudes, behaviors of an ongoing social system, an occupational social system. When I was working for the prison system, I've done a lot of work within the criminal justice world. Maybe that's now why I'm in this office now instead of, on the street and in the cell block. I like teaching, but besides that, when I was working, and it was the same when I was in the probation department, it was the same when I was CPS, we formed these little cliques, these gangs inside of the social system. And this is an ongoing issue. We've discussed it over the past weeks. It is a continuous process that results in both legal and illegal behaviors, especially because of the cliques that are formed. It's habitual behaviors, both good or bad. They persist as long as the attitudes, the beliefs, the perceptions, and the habits of those expectations remain supportive of them. Okay. As long as you have the narrative, as long as you control the narrative and you control what's going on in your world, you're going to find that you get to do what you want to do. Frank Serpico talked about this level of corruption that was within the NYPD, and everybody supported this corruption, so it continued to fester. Okay. And you hear people talking about institutional racism, and they want to fight against institutional racism. Yes, racism has existed in the past. There may be instances of racism today, but I don't think that that's a common habitual behavior. Okay, because racist attitudes and racist behaviors within the law enforcement, in my opinion, and it might be only my opinion, that it's not supported by the rank and file officers, by the social system. Okay, so any set assumptions or values or beliefs that are shared by the members of the organization is organizational culture. And this culture is, they create their language, their symbols, their folklore, The direct behaviors of organizational members. Okay, I'm code 4. Okay, the one that really bothers me is this. Okay, everywhere in the world until recently, this was a symbol that meant okay, I'm okay, everything's okay, everything's good. Okay, but that's not what it means anymore. This symbol, okay, has been changed, and now it's WP, which stands for white power. Okay, so you have cultures that are taking over symbols. You're taking over the things. In sign language, as you guys know, I use sign, because my son is profoundly deaf. Okay, so, throughout the day, when I'm with my son, we sign. This means okay. This means asshole. So if you ever see me go like this to you, you know what I'm doing. Okay. These symbols, languages, folklore, the direct behaviors of the organizational members, and it's part of the culture. The thin blue line is part of the culture. Organizational cultures are invented, they're discovered, they're deployed by groups in order to cope with external influences and internal change. But we go back to the thin blue line. We go back to the gray line. In Texas, our correctional officers wear gray. But this line that creates the organizational culture of criminal justice is a society within itself. Okay, so let's define some key terms. Culture is the whole of society. It includes the knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, customs, and other capabilities and routines. Values are the desired goals of that organization. Our norms is specify what people should do. Folkways is the standard way of doing things. This is the way that we've always done it. Right or wrong, this is the way we've always done it. Mores are the strong views of right and wrong. Laws are where those mores are codified. Okay, and laws, and this is another lecture all by itself, and if you look through my YouTube channel, you're going to find some lectures on laws. But these key terms are always important. Okay, social control. This is the process of perpetuating conformity to the culture. Okay, and we're seeing these culture wars going on right now within America, that we want to establish social control. You want to ensure that society follows and conforms and assimilates to the given narrative. Those people who violate the conformity to the narrative are punished. You're sanctioned. If you conform and you fall in line, you are rewarded. And these rewards and these punishments can be formal or informal. And I've already talked about the subcultures, and these are little groups inside of the culture that have their own beliefs, their own norms, their own values, and sharing these values, even if they're sharing the values of the dominant culture, they still have their own twist on things. Okay. And then there's the counterculture. Currently, the counterculture, I know that Antifa and BLM and the Democrats and the people on the left have been claiming this counterculture, and that they're fighting against this culture of the Republicans and the conservatives. But I contend that the counterculture is those that are fighting against the Antifa and the BLM. Because we're running around and we're canceling the culture. Okay? And canceling culture would be counterculture. We want to cancel everything that's gotten us to this point. Okay. And we want to cancel the culture that came before. and that process is being led by groups like the Black Bloc and Antifa and the BLM. To some extent, the Klan and the white supremacists. Yeah, I'm putting all of these people in the same group because they're wanting to destroy what we have and what we have established and developed. So in my opinion, let me twist this around here so you can get the Buc-ee's ad in the commercial. Maybe I should charge Buc-ee's. But you have all of these groups that are outside of the normative. Anything outside the normative is considered deviant. Anything outside the accepted culture is deviance, whether that's the BLM tearing down statues, whether it's Antifa attacking and burning down government buildings, or the Klan who is attacking racial and ethnic minorities. These are all part of the counterculture. And my stance is that that counterculture, that culture of hate, that culture of destruction has taken over, as evidenced in the most recent election. I know that Trump supporters are arguing and they're saying, it's not over yet. Well, they're going to fight, and they should fight, and they should demand that every vote be counted. But in December, when all of this is said and done, we're going to find out whether or not the Republican conservatives are on the inside or the outside. Are they going to say, yes, this election was fair, or are they going to spend the next 4 years, like we've seen the last 4 years, saying that the presidency of Joseph Biden is illegitimate? Okay. And this is where the culture wars come in. And we have to, as criminal justice practitioners, we have to understand these culture wars. Okay, so I've got some questions to ask you. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll ask them in a little bit. So the socialization process is both formal and informal, and it comes in stages. The first stage is anticipatory, and this is prior to employment. This is during that background check, and a couple of our graduate students have been accepted. My understanding is that, a couple of you watching this lecture have been accepted into jobs within law enforcement. And you've gone through this all year. I'd say, I don't know, since early summer, you've been going through this background check. You've been going through interviews and psychological evaluations and physical fitness programs. This is all anticipatory. This is all making sure that you, as an employee, adhere to certain behavioral standards. We want to make sure that you have a history of living to some form of behavioral standard. One of you guys, girls, last week in the discussion talked about the election and the election that just happened, and that you would like to see some reform and some changes to the way, or to the way that the criminal justice is practiced in our country. But you made an important point. Both Vice President Biden and Senator Harris do not have a history of criminal justice reform. Well, they have a history of criminal justice reform, but that reform has been strict. They've been harsh on racial and ethnic minorities in their history. Okay, so we can anticipate, based upon their history, we can anticipate that nothing's going to change when it comes to the way that they conduct criminal justice, and they expect criminal justice to be practiced throughout this country. There's not going to be any changes at all. Then you have the formal socialization process. that goes through going to the academy and through your field training operation. Every job that I've had, whether it was in the prison system, probation field, or CPS, I've always gone to an academy. I've always had to go through this formal socialization process that taught me as an agent of this to, the rules, the laws, how we act and how we live and how we're expected to conduct ourselves. Did you know that when you're getting a background check done with DPS, they will drive a DPS car and park it in your front yard or park it in front of your house and take a picture of it? And they will make a judgment on whether or not they want to see that car parked in front of your house. And because of the condition of your house and the way that your house looks like, you could lose your job. Standards of certain behavior. The informal process occurs through interaction with significant others, peers, managers, even clients. One of the things when I first got out of the academy for the federal prison system, I went to my field training officer, and the first thing I learned was, forget everything that you learned in the academy because it's pointless and it's useless. Forget everything that you learned in school because it's pointless and it's useless. Stay away from those guys. Those guys are going to get you in trouble. Those guys are going to get you dead. You need to remember everything that you've learned here, everything that you've learned in your undergraduate school, everything that you learn in the academy, because those things are going to be important to saving your life and to make sure that you don't end up in prison. The formal socialization process will make sure that you stay out of prison. The informal sometimes can be very detrimental to you. So the model of influences, according to Kotz and Kahn of 1978, explained, they explained how socializing influences affect the individual. Okay, role expectations. How are you expected to behave? How are you expected to handle yourself? Okay, putting on a DPS uniform means a lot because the uniform means a lot, and there's a certain expectation that's expected. Being a city police officer or a correctional officer, the uniform that you put on, or a deputy or a sheriff, the uniform that you put on puts you in a role where there are expectations of behavior. Okay, the individual's perception and understanding of this role is the received role. And then your behavior is how you project yourself. It's how you respond to the complexity of information that you've received. Okay, as Mr. Hammond says, I'm not a very good academic. And then there's times he says that I'm a perfect academic. Okay, you walk up and down the hallways of this university, and all you find are the three of us here. Okay, Mr. Hammond, Dr. Kickbush, and myself. The other professors are gone. They're here for their minimum 5 hours of office hours that they have to do every week and the classes that they teach. If they teach all online, you never see them. Okay. There's professors down the hall that only teach online, and I never see them here. Okay. But is that a role that's expected? Is that a behavior that's expected? Okay. I am here almost every day. I don't come in here on Saturdays. I don't come here on Sundays. I go hiking on Sundays. But Monday through Friday, I'm here. Okay. I know that I'm normally during breaks, and during the breaks, I'm normally traveling. I've got a really bad feeling about traveling, so I don't know that I'm going to be traveling this break. I think I'm going to stay close to home or just do weekend trips and not just go venture off. We'll see how things work out for the summer. But there's certain expectations that we have as individuals within the roles that we play. And this is all part of that socialization process. And most of the problems within socialization is related to role conflict, and it's a compliance with one role expectations as a result or a lack of compliance to another. What is your job? Are you an officer? Are you an investigator? What do you do? When you have role conflicts, it results in low job satisfaction, low performance, and increased stress. You, as managers and administrators of criminal justice, need to make sure that your cops have a firm understanding of what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing their job and what their role is. In extreme cases, corruption and official deviance occurs when there is conflict and role conflict within the individual. Okay, this illegal behavior ends up being encouraged by the organization's culture because there is a role conflict. Okay, we're told to ignore certain crimes, turn a blind eye to certain crimes, not to enforce certain crimes. The law enforcement in Oregon is probably about to go absolutely nuts because they're being told to decriminalize crime, okay, specifically drugs. These drugs are decriminalized, meaning it's still against the law to be in possession of methamphetamines and heroin and cocaine and all of these other drugs, but they're being told not to punish people for violating those crimes. So it's sending a mixed message to the cops. Well, this is a crime, but don't punish it. But it's a crime, don't punish it. It's a crime. And it causes stress and could eventually lead to cops dealing drugs. Could. There is no evidence that authoritarianism or violence-seeking individuals are attracted to police work. That is a myth. Okay, police officers are subjected to intense socialization processes. Okay, the structural aspects that connect police officers are built in there. Police work is depersonalizing. Okay, nobody celebrates the police officer. So because nobody celebrates the police officer, they form this solidarity and this drive towards professionalism. Okay, the nature of police work is ambiguous in its nature and all by itself. Okay. Correctional officers are attracted to the profession because of job security and its regular pay. Okay. Most new correctional officers know very little bit about the job. And then the academy is a month long or 6 weeks long. Okay. Correctional officers often delay formal training. Being a jailer, you don't have to go to jailer school for 6 months. You don't have to go to probation officer school until you've been a probation officer for 6 months. And this increases informal socialization. And the informal socialization appears to be more influential than the formal structure. Okay, so we need to be careful with the informal structures, and we need to make sure that the formal structures are established and created. Okay, so the discussions that I'd like you guys to have is, how police departments attempt to overcome negative influences of informal groups, the informal cliques. How do you overcome this informal influence that can lead or tends to lead to criminality and deviance within the police department? The other issue I'd like you guys to discuss is establishing develop a program for training correctional officers. Okay, because for a special internal affairs unit. Okay, will they investigate the problems of contraband and violence. They investigate security threat groups. I want you guys to create a program. So this is not going to have to follow any APA rules. You are going to do references. Yeah, just follow the APA rules. Never mind. Who would you look for to recruit into this internal affairs unit? How would you structure the process of training into this internal affairs unit? And what would be the content of that training? What would be the problems that you associate with the socialization of creating this internal affairs unit? That's what you guys are going to be doing this week. This is what we're hoping to do. I'm also thinking about posting this up on my YouTube channel. So if you see this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, um, hit the little bell that lets you know when I post new videos. But yes, I am going to be posting this on my YouTube channel. I haven't posted there in a while. Socialization and the internal socialization, the socialization process issues that we see within criminal justice is the most important, I think, the most important issue that we have to deal with. I want you guys to fix it. And we're going to address it, and we're going to discuss it in our discussion forums and in your essays. So with that, I am going to end this video, and I'll see you in the forums.